Hello and welcome, and we are back with another review of Undead Unluck. We're finally at the big 200. Now I apologize for the late upload of this video, but I've been dealing with the tragic loss of a close family member, so I will be completing this video quite solemnly. This chapter is titled Regaining Lost Ground, and we start off with a flashback, quite similar to the Beast arc where we started off with a couple flashbacks about Top and Haruka. Maybe we might see a couple flashbacks with the previous fight with Unforgettable and Language. So yeah, as we know in the previous loop, Language was neutralized, which caused the unification of all world languages. And previously I was trying to remember who were the participants in that quest. I kind of thought Juiz would be a part of it because it was a master rule, so Juiz should be needed in the master rule quest, but it turns out it was actually Nico, and not only was it Nico, it was Nico solo. I'm thinking it must be some sort of favorable matchup situation. Because Nico does even open up this chapter by saying there's no way his ability would lose. He's even sitting there all quite nonchalantly. I think he's even brewing a cup of coffee whilst he's telling this to her. So I'm thinking Unforgettable must be a pretty hard counter to Language's ability, and probably is the reason why Juiz has recruited Nico to be a part of the Union. Language makes note that this is the first time she's been beaten by a negator other than Juiz. Nico is surprised by the fact that she knows Juiz. Obviously, because at this point he wouldn't have known about looping. Language noticed this fact and just introduces herself as the 8th seat of the master room table and asks Nico who he was. And quite fittingly, Nico's actually the 8th seat of the Union at that point in time. Language says that she'll remember Nico until the day they meet again, and that's when the flashback ends. Now we're back to the present, and Language is looking at Nico and Ichiko quite menacingly. She says to Nico that she never forgot him, and just like him, for the past 4.6 billion years, she hasn't forgotten for a single second that moment of disgrace. The way Language is acting and how she looks right now, it seems like Nico really did pack her up quite easily. Nico realizes that she knows him from the previous loop. Then Language goes on to say, finally, they shall begin, for the first time in 4.6 billion years. His ability and her language shall face off in the ultimate game. This line about a game leads me to think that Language's ability works similar to how Spring did, where he forces you into a game you have to participate in. So depending on the rules of how her game might work, it may be the reason why Unforgettable has such a great advantage over her. Because she's Language, I'm thinking there's probably a lot of knowledge-based things, and because Nico's so smart, because he can't really forget anything, it was just so simple to defeat her. Now back to the chapter, Language just has a look of absolute shock. She's realized that Nico doesn't have his ability at the moment. She asks Nico what happened to Unforgettable, but he has no idea what that is, and he remembers back to Fuko talking about preventing his tragedy, and he realizes that must be the ability that he'll eventually gain. Language is not happy with this at all, and she says this is no good and that she won't allow it. She's waited 4.6 billion years for this rematch, and she wants it with Unforgettable. She says he's gonna gain his ability right here, right now. We briefly head back over to Fuko, and they're speeding off on the Nimbus cloud. Haruka and Julia can barely hold on. They're even screaming at the back, and that actually gives Fuko some insight into Language's ability right now. So they haven't lost the ability to use their voice. It's only literally the concept of language itself which they've lost. But she's saying the situation is really bad, and if she's correct, the person that's being targeted right now is the person who soloed Language in the last loop, which is Nico. Language asks what his tragedy will be. Fuko realizes that if they're after Nico's Unforgettable, who the casualty will be. And in the next panel we see Language uses like an arrow attack that's coming out from the book that she's holding, and it strikes Ichiko. Okay, from this attack, I'm thinking Language might have an ability similar to what I was saying before, kinda like Levy's letter magic. I think maybe the book that she's holding is in fact a dictionary, and she can just conjure up the words that are in that book. Like at the end of the last chapter, she was sitting on a chair. She may have just conjured the chair out of that book. Language says that she's glad she was easy enough to kill, and again she announces it's time for the ultimate game to begin. But in the next page we see that Ichiko uses astral projection to keep herself alive. This clearly shows why Soul wanted to get rid of her. She truly has a great understanding of the Soul Rule. Nico is still in a panic over this attack, and Ichiko realizes that he still can't see her, even though she's told him about souls multiple times. She calls him hard-headed. Language then starts to talk to Ichiko directly, and asks her why won't she die for their sake. In fact, Language starts to talk some mad shit to Ichigo. She says she can't even throw an attack in her state, and that her movements are way too slow anyway, and that she's a useless negator. Language says that if Ichigo dies, Nico will grow far stronger, strong enough to fight against Language, and that would just be the better option. But Ichigo just cuts her off and says no. Why should she have to die for this prematurely balding jerk with smelly feet? It's a good thing Nico can't see or hear her, because I think that would have hurt his feelings a bit. She also says she respects Fuko's decision. Fuko has made their happiness her top priority in this loop. Ichigo knows that if Nico gained Unforgettable that he'd be way stronger, but Fuko has been keeping it at bay for a reason. Ichigo says there's no way she's gonna let the ability manifest, and that they'll take her down together. Language just says fine, and then she starts communicating with Apocalypse. She says to tell Fuko to grant those 2 seats immediately, and if she doesn't, she'll magnify the language absorption effect to the rest of the world, causing the collapse of civilization. This truly shows the power of the Master Rules. Her ability is simple in nature, but yet it's very, very effective. Because imagine if in the entire world everyone just stopped being able to speak to each other. Who knows what kind of carnage that would cause. We're slowly starting to see the reasons as to why she's above Beast in the Master Rule table. To be honest though, I'm wondering if it's a bluff. Because if she could do that, why didn't she just do that straight away? You can argue that she didn't just so that she can conserve energy. But I don't know, it seems a bit fishy to me. Apocalypse seems unhappy with this. He says the system was designed so that they fought over loot privileges. But now it kind of seems like they're just handing out these points willy-nilly. But I suppose it doesn't really matter anymore now that this is the last loop. But anyway, with the threat that Language put out, Fuko has no choice but to oblige. And she transfers over the points from Unbreakable and Unstoppable over to Nico and Ichigo, making them the 12th and 13th seat. And yeah, so the next quest has begun with participants Ichigo Nimura and Nico Vorgel. And that is where the chapter ends off. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this fight goes. I thought that Nico's Unforgettable might manifest during this fight, but it seems like it's not going to. And I wonder if in this loop, they will just stave off having Nico get Unforgettable, because he's smart enough without it, and it really only seemed to work as more of a burden for him. I mean, he's been able to replicate quite a lot of his tech from the last loop without it, so I don't think he needs it. And I'm not really sure how he can expand on it using the soul abilities to make it more powerful. How is someone gonna just be able to remember better? So yeah, I could just see Nico not having Unforgettable for this loop. He is really essentially the same character with and without it. Another thing that I want to bring up from this chapter is the fact that the tragedy needs to happen for the ability to manifest. Because we've learned that the negation abilities come from the previous negators. They choose who the next negator is going to be. So I thought it would just be an automatic process after that previous negator dies. But it seems like after they died, the negation ability might just be held in limbo until like God decides to like imbue it upon someone. That's probably the only control that Sun has in the negation passing process. The person chooses who it goes to next, but he can choose to imbue it onto them at any time. And he wants to imbue it at the moment of peak tragedy so that the negators lose their hope. Or it could be a thing like in a video game. A certain event has to happen in order for it to manifest. I'm getting this kind of thinking because I've been recently watching Shangri-La. That's a great anime, you should probably check it out. So yeah, you have to do certain events before you're able to progress through the game. But that still raises the question, why does it have to be a tragic moment? Maybe the first initial time, that's when God decides, but after that, he's selected this tragic moment, he can't choose another tragic moment. And yeah, it's just decided from then on, at this point, once this certain thing happened, that's when your negation ability manifests. But yeah, that is all I have for this chapter. Thank you for watching all the way through, if you did. Again, I'm sorry for the late upload, but I hope you understand my reasons why. I will be back in a few days for a review of chapter 201, and I will also let you know that I am working on a couple other videos that aren't just chapter reviews, and I'll be looking to drop them within the next coming week, so look out for those. I've already got the audio recorded for one, just need to try and do some video editing. I'm gonna try and do something more than just some background gameplay and some panels over it. But yeah, look out for that, and thank you guys, I'll see you later.